Hello lovely people, welcome to another book chat, the weekly roundup of stuff I've read at some point in my past. I've got 4 books to talk about this week, 1 fiction, 2 non-fiction and 1 poetry. I'm going to start with the fiction and let's just crack on with it.
Sophie Vlogs.
So, I read The Obelisk Gate by N.K. Jemisin. This is the second book in the Broken Earth trilogy. I absolutely adored the 5th season. It is a series that has very much excited me. This is the second book in the series, but I'm going to try and talk about it in a spoiler-free manner. Suffice to say, I said in my review of the first book that I had expected sci-fi. It felt very fantasy until the very end when we had some sci-fi aspects brought in. This sort of picks up some of that and runs with it. I didn't enjoy this as much as the first one, but I think that's partly because of, I know there's that like second book syndrome thing. This one was a little bit more given lots of information in sort of like presented to you, like so-and-so tells you all this information, rather than I think in the first one it felt a little bit more like discovering things rather than like exposition, if that makes sense. That said, I enjoyed all the information I was given and it was nice to get more information, so I'm not necessarily saying that's a terrible thing. I'm just saying that it is something that I observed while reading it. The first book has 3 different narratives going on at the same time. This one has 2 narratives. I can't reveal who the second point of view in this is because that's a huge spoiler, but suffice to say I really enjoyed having that point of view. It was very interesting to get another perspective added into the mix, which makes you look at certain characters with new information. The way that certain character relationships are developing in this, I can see future conflict that is to come, and I'm really interested to see how those things are going to play out. We're getting a little bit more information on what this overarching like aim is going to be in the next book as well. So suffice to say, this one didn't like blow my socks off quite as much as the first one did. However, it has made me very excited for the 3rd book in the series, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how this all sort of like resolves itself and that sort of thing. I don't know. I feel like I'm still processing some of the information at the edges, but I'm very intrigued. Moving on to non-fiction, this is Easier Ways to Say I Love You by Lucy Fry. I got this in the Queer Book Box. My only knowledge of it going in was it was about Lucy Fry's like autobiographical memoir about raising a child, but then also exploring polyamory. This was an interesting book. I've never read a book about polyamory before. I think if you're looking for a book that is explicitly like, let's explore polyamory as a topic, this is potentially not the best place to start, only because a lot more of this, I expected this to be a lot more focused on the polyamory, whereas actually it is a memoir about her life. I would like to give some real trigger warnings for this, so if I can remember them all. If I can't remember them all, I will also write more down below. So definitely eating disorders / disordered eating, depression, miscarriage, self-harm. There are more that I'm not remembering off the top of my head right now. I will include a list down below because there are some heavy things talked about in this, and also in quite a bit of detail. So I do think that if you went into this just looking for an exploration of polyamory, you might be taken aback by some of the topics in it. It wasn't a problem for me because those are not things that cause me problems, but I'm just flagging that it's sort of sold as like, let's look at polyamory and queer family making, whereas actually it's kind of hard to fully explore her diving into polyamory and her personal relationships without also exploring some of her own traumas and stuff like that she has to work through and how they affect those relationships. So essentially this book starts out with Lucy is married to her wife. Her wife is expecting their baby. She starts an affair with another woman. This then results in her and her wife having a conversation and then exploring polyamory. And that's sort of your start point, but then you do go back through Lucy's life and look at these topics and how they've really influenced her and how they've affected how she is able to receive intimacy, be intimate with people, that sort of thing. Like, I think that is entirely understandable. I think you can't just separate out your relationships and write a book about your relationships that is separate from all of the other messy things that make you who you are, because that has such an effect on your relationships. So I understand why this explores those topics. I just felt like a little flag might be necessary given some of the talks that are given in this. From like a writing style perspective, this was not my 100% favourite writing style. I don't think it's a bad writing style. It's not a style that is my favourite type to read. I find it kind of hard to sum up what the writing style is like. There's quite, everyone's referred to by initials as a start point, which is fine, but initially takes a little bit of getting used to. It's very like, there's a lot of like metaphorical stuff. Sometimes the way she talks about things, I don't know, sometimes she's very like matter of fact with what's happening, and then other times it's quite like she just goes off on some little metaphorical descriptions, but they're quite like staccato. So it's like description full stop, description full stop, description full stop, and they're all different metaphors describing the moment. I don't know, it wasn't the easiest style for me personally, although I can see how other people will really enjoy the style. And about halfway through, I think I settled into this book more. And I think that's partly because we're exploring lots more topics. I sort of started to understand Lucy as a person more, especially because this does start off with her getting into polyamory through cheating, rather than just like having some frank conversations with her wife. I think I was a little bit, at the beginning, I was like, not a great fan of this, even though I know that you can 100% be polyamorous with no cheating involved. Yes. Yeah, suffice to say, this was really interesting. I would be interested to read more books about polyamory, just to like understand that a little bit better from my perspective. But I had a good time. It's not the easiest of books, I think, because we are dealing with some heavy stuff and the style is not my favourite. But it was interesting, and I'm glad to have had that perspective brought into my life. The next piece of non-fiction I read is A Honeybee Heart Has 5 Openings, A Year of Keeping Bees by Helen Jukes. This is a memoir all about Helen Jukes' attempts to keep bees. Essentially, she moved to Oxford for a new job. She was feeling very unsatisfied, and she decided, having dabbled in beekeeping with accompanying people who had bees previously, she was considering owning bees herself. This book is half about bees and half a memoir about Helen Jukes' particular time. I preferred the moments where we were talking about bees, partly because one of the reasons why Helen Jukes is getting bees is because she feels lost and that sort of thing. So the memoir side of this was just a lot about her feeling lost, a lot of quite like mundane anecdotes about her life, and then also about this relationship that she ends up exploring. But I wasn't super invested in all of that, whereas I found all the information on bees very interesting. About half of this book, the first half of this book, she doesn't own bees yet. She's researching into bees. So there's a lot of historical information about bees, so like how have we interacted with bees throughout history, a lot of looking at some of those pioneers who really began scientifically studying bees, what that meant, what that looked like, what theories about bees were, that sort of thing, as well as your practical, like how does one keep bees, what are some dangers that face bees, stuff like that. So the actual bee stuff I found really interesting. I think maybe some of the memoir stuff, I didn't not enjoy it, but I also just wasn't super interested in it. It wasn't what I was here for. But I had a good time and I enjoyed it. I think I thought that was going to be more about bees than it was, because it was more about a memoir, which, similar to the first one, I thought that was going to be more about polyamory, where actually we were exploring like a lot of like really personal, deep topics, neither of which are bad things. It's just, adjusting expectations. And then finally, I also read some poetry. So I read Selected Poems of Robert Browning, edited by James Reeves. I picked this up because John Connolly's book, which, the Book of Lost Things, there's a poem that runs throughout that book, which is a Robert Browning poem, which is Childe Roland to the Dark Tower Came. And that poem runs throughout the book, and it's really like, the book is sort of like structured around the poem and that sort of thing. And I really like that poem. So I thought I would read some more Robert Browning. A lot of this is not hugely my cup of tea, largely just because, like you read a poem and you're like, this is a perfectly good poem. It is like technically well written, but also like it makes me feel nothing. There was one other poem that I actually really liked, which was The Last Ride Together, which is all about like this person who is riding with his love, and like she doesn't really love him back, but he wants this ride they're on to last forever, because he knows that she doesn't love him back, but he so loves that moment of being in that ride without anyone else and that sort of thing. It was really like deeply full of emotion. I can see how like at the time this was written, people would have been like, oh my, how dramatic, blah blah blah, that sort of thing. So I really enjoyed that one, and I did enjoy some of the other ones. They're not poems that I necessarily would like, sometimes you go back to poems in certain moments because you are like, this poem, like I connect to this poem in this moment and that sort of thing. I didn't really have a lot of that with the collection, but it was interesting to read more of Robert Browning's work and just like understand him as a poet better. that's everything I wanted to talk about in this book chat. Have you read any of these? Who are some of your favourite poets? That would be interesting to know, like poetry that like makes you have like an emotional reaction. I'd be really interested to know that. And otherwise, I hope you're having a lovely day, and I'll see you next time for something different.